need to make sure you understand this. It wasn't because Georgia State, who was 2-10 last year, beat Tennessee real bad last night. Oh, that wasn't the reason I was sick. All right. I got sick because of that, but that wasn't the reason I was sick this morning. 2-10? Okay. What we're trying to do is to understand, go back and look at our faith. Our faith had a beginning. And for most of us, our faith began as a child. And in that process, we need to understand that childhood faith does not work in an adult world. We teach our children that God answers prayers, and He does. We teach our children that God hates evil, and He does. But when we get into an adult world, and we start praying, and we look, and there's evil all around us, and we say, God, you don't like evil. Well, it creates a problem for us. And when our faith began, we need to understand childhood faith doesn't work in an adult world. Adult faith works in an adult world. And all of us had a beginning with our faith. What we're doing and what we have been doing is we're going back and we're looking at the foundational elements of our faith to make sure that we have them grounded and that we're able to grasp them. One of the things that we looked at was God, Jesus, death, and the judgment. When Paul preached in Athens, he began there. Those people did not and had not know Jesus, and they had not heard about Jesus. So he began there with them, and that became important. We went on to find that sin breaks relationships, and that's why Jesus came, because I didn't do what I know I should have done, and because of that, it creates problems in my family, with my children, with my employer at work, with my friends when I do things that are wrong. And we realized it wasn't just saying, I'm sorry. See, that's another childhood thing. Saying I'm sorry is part of it, but there's more to it than that. And what we have to understand is we need to become a new creation, and we talked about that. Jesus says, this is why I have come. That's why I'm here, to make it possible for you to understand and correct the sin that's in your life and in the relationships that you have. See, forgiveness restores relationships. We're looking at adult faith. These are foundational things. Sometimes we forget those things. Trusting God, we looked at last week. Believing. See, we asked the question, well, does God even know I'm here? Does He care about me? And one of the things that we saw in the conversation that God had with Abraham, He makes a statement that it's been credited for your belief, has been credited for you for righteousness. In other words, I can have a relationship with God where He knows who I am, He knows what I need, and He cares. And it's through our belief we trust in God, and we have a right relationship. And this is the question that God asks. Will you trust me? Will you believe in me? Well, this morning I want to ask another question. We're looking at adult faith. But I want to ask this question: what's the relationship between rules and God? You know, we talk about faith, and people all around us talk about all of the rules. And under the Jewish law, there were 1,630 plus rules. Now, in the New Covenant, Jesus changes that, and we understand that. But there are things in our relationship with God that He says, hey, you shouldn't do these things. So what is the relationship between rules and God? We're looking at adult faith. We're trying to understand what it is. And this becomes very important. Rules always, and everything we do assumes a relationship in that environment where there are rules. Wherever there are rules, you're accountable to those rules. Now, most of us don't like this term, but we need to understand it in the context of our faith, because this takes a negative, oftentimes, approach to rules. It's like, well, if you do that, I'm going to, and we think about God. God says, if you do that, I'm going to do this. That's not God. That's not the God we serve now. So we get rules and God messed up. If you're accountable to the rules, you're in some kind of relationship. And let me show you. I could have chosen hundreds of models, and I've chosen a few to talk about. The family model, where we as parents, we bring children into the world, and as mom and dad, we negotiate, because we're two adults, and we negotiate and we decide tasks. We decide who's going to take care of the task, when they're going to be done. We bring children into the world. We set rules or boundaries for our children. And so there is this family model. And our children are born into this, and they become part of a family. There's a mom and there's a dad. Part of the problem we have in our society today is there's not a lot of dads in the family model. And so consequently, problems develop when the model breaks down. But, you know, as parents, we tell our children that there is this rule. Don't put your hand on the hot ice. See, we all know that. When we all, what, hot stove?
Not ice.
Eye of the stove. My Tennessee got in the way.
We all know senior mama.
Yeah, see, no, she couldn't hear. No, that was my Tennessee pronunciation of eye on the stove, a hot element. See, I learned real quick. And see, we've all told our children that. Don't play out in the road. Now, guys, we all know as parents, we're not trying to keep our kids from having and enjoying life. We're trying to protect them. That's what we, as parents, do. And as the kids get older, we set different boundaries, we set different rules. But in my life, I can honestly say, I have never set a boundary and a rule for the children that I was trying to take something away from them. I was trying to keep them safe. So consequently, now, my kids, as they became teenagers in Tennessee, you know, they didn't like them. None of our kids like them, and so we have to set boundaries and how to deal with those things. But there's one thing that we also know is I have no right to set boundaries and rules for someone else's children. Okay? In other words, I can't call my neighbor down the road and say, I want to speak to Sarah. Hi, Gary. I'm doing fine, but I need to speak to Sarah. Okay, I'll get her for you. Sarah, have you done your homework? Okay. Is your brother there? Okay. Let me speak to him. You didn't drive too fast. I will punish you and send you. We don't do that as parents. We set rules for our children because we love them and we care for them. So, there is the family model, and we understand those things. There's the club model. I could have called it the work model, where to be part of a club or to work for this organization, we go in, they talk about our qualifications, then they begin to talk about what they want from us, what they expect, and here's the rules that we have in this company or in this club. And if you want to be part of this club, you have to follow these rules. And if you don't follow the rules, we can ask you to leave, or we can fire you and let you go. So we're familiar with the club model. It has rules. Then there's the neighborhood model. See, we don't have to talk about that. When someone rides around in our neighborhoods, and all of a sudden we get a letter, you're not cutting your grass like you should be. It's part of the covenant of living in this community. And if you don't do that, we're going to fine you. We found out, living where we live, that there's been about 40 or 50 houses in the neighborhood. They sent them a letter saying, you have to paint your house. It's fading. And you have X amount of months to do that. Well, where we live, everybody said, okay, and they went and they painted it, but tell me I got to paint my house. There's just something wrong about that. But they can say, well, you don't have to live here. You can put it on the market and you can sell it. But if you want to live in our neighborhood, here's what you have to do. See, guys, we're all familiar with rules and the context of these rules. Rules imply a relationship, which implies that we are accountable if we want to stay in that relationship. Now, I can get rid of all of those, but we're still left with this understanding. How does my behavior line up with God? And what does God expect of me? And when am I in? And when am I out? And how am I supposed to know? See, I can get rid of all the rules, but it leaves us with this question, and especially with God. Now, God's not into kicking us out. I believe I could walk away from that, but that's not what He does. But what happens, these rules, these boundaries, whatever He gives us, helps us to understand what God expects of us. Family model, club model, neighborhood model, they all have rules, and we're familiar with them. Now, again, we're looking at adult faith. We're trying to understand the relationship with God and our faith. Now, if I was to ask you where the Ten Commandments are found, you would know. You would say, Gary, it's found in Exodus. And it's found in Exodus, the 20th chapter. And you start there and you read the Ten Commandments, and you can go on and read 1,620 other rules that God had for the children of Israel. But I want to explain something to you, because God made a statement right at the very beginning of the Ten Commandments, and that becomes very important for us to understand rules and relationship. Let me go back. All right? Abraham and Sarah, we talked about them. They had Isaac. Isaac married Rebekah, and he had Esau and Jacob. And Jacob married Rachel and Leah. We know the story behind that. And they had 12 sons. Well, right here, this is Joseph. Now, Benjamin's the youngest, but there's Joseph. And Joseph ended up going into Egypt. But we know how that story went. The 12, got upset because apparently Joseph appeared to be more important to Jacob than the others, and they kind of got upset about that. And they sold him into slavery and he ended up in Egypt. After a period of time, we know that Jacob and his family grew. Boy, did it grow. He went in, and then all of a sudden, after 400 years, there's about a couple of million of them. Well, God was waiting. He sent Moses to get them, and he took them and led them out of Egypt. The reason I'm saying that is you'll see in Exodus 20. See, if I was to ask you where the Ten Commandments are, you would have said book of Exodus, 20th chapter. The Bible scholars. God makes this statement. Guys, it is so important. And we read right through it. Watch this. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God. Who made you our God? Did we ask for you to be our God? Why are you our God? I'm not sure I understand that. We've never heard from you. We grew into a great group of people, and you sent Moses, and we're thankful for that. We're very thankful for that. But you said, I am the Lord your God. Well, where have you been for 400 years if you're our God? Well, interesting question. Who brought you out of Egypt? See, they had seen the 10 plagues. They understood what God did. They understood cloud by day, pillar of fire by night, and that they were being led somewhere. And he says, I am the Lord your God. Now watch what he says next. You've done nothing for me. You shall have no other gods before me. Why? Why should I believe in you and none of the other gods? Well, God had just said, I've done something for you. And you've done nothing for me, but I did something for you that was great, and you guys saw it. It was huge. It was big. And what it did is it removed you out of the land of slavery. I'm your God. God did something for the children of Israel. Isn't that what we do as parents for our children? See, we're trying to understand adult faith. We're trying to understand our relationship with God. I'm trying to make sure I've got all of the elements where they need to be, but one of them is I've got to understand rules in relationship to God. And God becomes a parent. Setting rules, setting boundaries. Now, why do parents do that for kids? To keep them safe. We're not trying to hurt them. We're not trying to keep them from enjoying life. We want them to enjoy life, but we want them to understand danger in this world in which we live, so we set boundaries, we set rules, and God becomes like a parent. And He only gives rules to those who are His children. Now, beginning of verse 3 of Exodus 20, if I was to ask you where are the Ten Commandments, you'd say Exodus 20, right? Exodus 20. Verse 3 says, you shall have no other gods before me. And He lists. Okay, Alright, it put me to sleep the first time I read them. 629 more rules. Okay, I'm honest. I went to sleep the first time I read them. But see, God is our Father. He's our parent. And we are His children. Watch this. Yet to all who did receive Him, to those who believed in His name, watch this, He gave the right to become children of God. In other words, God will be our parent, and He will set some rules, if we understand the family model, that's going to keep me safe. Not take things away from me. That's not God. God is love, okay? He's trying to keep... Now, when I say safe, watch this. From having negative consequences to our decisions. He gave us the right to become children of God. We have to make that decision if that's what we want. Now watch this. And I will be a father to you, and you will be my sons and daughters, says the Lord Almighty. We're going to be His sons and daughters. He's going to be our Father. Paul goes on and he says something very important about that, and we're going to see that. But see, God chose the family model. And I talk about God, but when I talk to Him, I always talk to Him as Father. Do you know that when Jesus went to the temple when He was 12 years old and Mary and Joseph left Him, okay, it wasn't very good parenting, but it was a different model, family model back then. But they came and they found Him and said, what are you doing? Why didn't you come with us? And He said, don't you know I must be about my what? Father's business. Jesus related to Him in the family model as Father. Father. For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. Now, if I'm a child of God, He is keeping me, watch this, we're talking about adult faith, He's trying to keep me away from negative consequences in this adult world, because I live here as an adult. I make decisions. I make hundreds and thousands of decisions every week. And if we let God the Father guide us, we can stay away from the negative consequences. The Spirit you receive does not make you slaves, so that you live in fear again. Rather, the Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship. God adopted us. Family model, adult faith, living in this world, role of rules, the rules we have, talk about a relationship, and God is trying to keep us away from negative consequences when we make decisions. In other words, He's trying to guide us and direct us where we'll make better decisions. And watch this. And by Him we cry, Abba, Father. Now that's Daddy. Daddy. Now watch this. I just turned 72. Now don't you guys, I know you guys don't think that and believe that. Okay, Sandy the elder's not going to retire, sorry. Okay.
Did I hear that right? Did you say 50?
No, 50, that's what it was. I'll go to hell for lying, okay. He said, Abba. We call Daddy for small children, but watch this, guys. I'm 72 and I still say Abba. See, Abba infers that God is directing and caring for the children. And at 72, He still guides me to keep me away. See, we're dealing with adult faith. We want adult faith to work in an adult world. And what do we do with rules from our God, our Father? Watch this. The Spirit Himself testifies with our spirit that we are His children. You know how He testifies? He guides us. He gives us rules and He directs us. Not to take things away, but to keep us away from the negative consequences. John said this, see what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. God adopted the family model. Okay? Now, you've heard me say oftentimes, I don't hold people outside the church accountable to the things that God tells me. Now, they have to be accountable to enter into a relationship with Him. We're going to talk about how you get into a relationship in a few weeks. But the issue is, God gives us the rules. We're the children. Okay? We're the children. They don't have the ability to understand that our Father's trying to keep negative consequences away from us, and they go make the wrong decisions, and they end up with the negative consequences. Now, I've got to tell you something. As an adult dealing with my Father, I can choose to disobey. And I have. And negative consequences. It always happens. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free. See, I'm free in my relationship with God. I can choose to obey or not obey. But do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Now, I've got to tell you something. I can. But Paul's telling the Galatian church, don't do that. Now, is he trying to keep them away from something that will make them a better person or happier? No. He's trying to keep them away from negative That's what a father does. Rather serve one another humbly in love. Watch this. The acts of the flesh are obvious. Sexual immorality. Don't do that. The Father says don't do that. But I can if I want to. I'm free. I'm an adult. Alright? I can choose not to, and I'll have to deal with all the negative consequences. Impurity, debauchery. Alright? Idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish I can do every one of those. I'm an adult. But our Father says, don't do them. Have you? Am I the only one that ever disobeyed? No, I'm not even. Envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. Watch this. I warn you. I warn you. As I did before. Obviously, they're doing these things. That those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. Oh. That seems strange. Or do you not know that wrongdoers will not inherit? That's what my Father did. Do not be deceived. He's not saying that God's going to kick you out of the family. He's saying he had already talked about being slaves to sin. And if I become slaves to missing the mark, dealing with sexual immorality, idolatry, adultery, men who have sex with men, we can list the others, okay? If I go back and become slaves to that, God's not throwing me out. We're walking away. Watch. Guys, God chose the family model. He didn't choose it to take things away from us. As parents, we know. We set boundaries. We say, don't put your hand on the element on the stove. Even somebody from Tennessee. All right. It's the consequences of doing that. The consequences of lying. The consequences of sexual immorality. The consequences of drunkenness. I said, as a father, as a parent, I said, don't do that. God chose the family model. I'm 72. I get to call him Mama. Guys, he still directs my life. Adult faith. See, childhood faith doesn't work in an adult world, because in an adult world, we are held accountable for our decisions. Childhood faith, parents are responsible for the children and their safety. Now, in an adult world, we are responsible and held accountable for our decisions. Family model. He's our Father. And I'm thankful for that. I need guidance and direction. And we're going to sing this song. You'll have to stand. But here's the deal. We're singing Just As I Am to reconnect you with the emotions that you have. Because most of us responded in one way or another to Just As I Am. Not asking you to respond. I'm asking you to think back. We're trying to make sure all of the elements of our adult faith are shored up. And one of them, are you allowing God to be your Father and guide your life? fathers, we stand in your presence. We are your children. It's hard sometimes, Father, to relate to the adult world and being part of the adult world and doing adult things like we do. It's hard to relate sometimes as you being Father. But I do understand the family model. I understand how my parents guided and directed me. Father, I understand how I guided and directed my children. And all of that guidance was for the purpose of keeping them safe as they live in this world, to help them make better decisions. Father, give us the wisdom and the boldness that we need to look to you, pray. And if there are any that are here who need to talk to me, I'm available, or the elders. And Father, it's in your Son's name we pray this prayer. Amen. All right, guys, this coming